I am so excited to be here today and welcome you all to the official North American World Food Day celebration. My name is Danny Nierenberg. I am president and co-founder with Bernard Pollock of Food Tank. For those of you who don't know, Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in our food and agriculture systems. We do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. And again, that's why I'm so excited to be here, especially at ASU with my mentor, Kathleen Merrigan, who's been a great friend to Food Tank, and I'll introduce her in a little while. Before I introduce our incredible speakers, I want to share a few statistics to set the stage. You know, our title is Food is Medicine and Eating for Health, so let me share some info with you. Around the world, at least 673 million people experienced hunger in 2024, and that's at least. It's probably much higher. 2.6 billion people couldn't afford a healthy diet. The rate of obesity has doubled among adults over the last 35 years, and non-communicable diseases, including diet-related illnesses like heart disease and diabetes, are responsible for roughly 3/4 of deaths worldwide. In Arizona, 1 in 7 people face hunger. Chronic diseases like those I just mentioned are responsible for 7 in 10 deaths in the state, with heart disease being the leading cause. We're facing multiple crises at the same time, of course, our public health crises, which I just mentioned, but also extreme weather events and soil degradation, which are threatening crop yields and the nutrient density of our food. And disparity and conflict are increasing around the world. Over the last 9 months, we've seen cruel policies enacted that threaten communities' health and nutrition. Cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, will result in the loss of some or all benefits for an estimated 1 in 8 recipients in the United States. And a recent study in the Lancet estimates that by 2030, we will lose at least an additional 14 million lives globally because of the dismantlement of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the loss of funding for life-saving humanitarian aid and health programs. But the reason we're here today, despite these stark statistics, is to find hope. We're here to highlight the policies and practices and individuals and organizations that are working and that can be replicated and scaled up and shared throughout the world. Farmers, chefs, teachers, and community leaders are finding ways to uplift traditional and indigenous crops for both their cultural importance and their resilience to the climate crisis. School gardens are connecting young people with fresh, healthy produce while teaching them about food and agriculture systems. And produce prescription programs are helping eaters access the nutritious foods they need to thrive. Scaling what works, what's working in those bright spots, requires all of us, no matter where we fall on the political spectrum. And we need to listen to one another. This year's World Food Day theme is Hand in Hand for Better Foods and a Better Future. And it's so important because we need to strengthen the partnerships and collaborations we already have and forge new and sometimes unexpected collaborations. What I've learned over the last year or so is that listening to the people I disagree with is more important than ever before. It's the only way we can move forward. It doesn't mean I will necessarily agree with them, but we have to find ways to have uncomfortable conversations with civility. Before we get into the program, let me just get a little housekeeping out of the way. I want to thank our partners who have made today possible. Thanks to our hosts at the Swette Center for Sustainable Food Systems at Arizona State University, especially Kathleen Merrigan, Suzanne Palmieri, and Ali Landsman. Give them a round of applause quickly. A big thanks to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, especially Tom Pesic. Please give him a round of applause. Thanks to our friends at the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation, especially Lindsay Waugh, Erica Carner, Courtney Schraben-Hake, and a big thanks to them and Sprouts Farmers Market for supporting the delicious lunch you just enjoyed. Give that a round of applause, please. And I also want to thank the dozens and dozens and dozens of farmers and other food producers, farm workers, chefs, cooks, servers, Swette Center staff, and others who are making sure we are all nourished today. Please give them a round of applause. So to make sure that we end on time today, and we will, The panels and discussions you'll see are very fast-paced and dynamic. If I cut a conversation short, I hope you'll forgive me later. We just want to make sure that we hear from as many people as possible. You will have time during the reception to chat up with speakers and talk with one another. I want to also tell you that we'll have this great reception afterwards. If you need a bio break, feel free to step out at any time. We do not have breaks built into the program. Right now, we're going to share a land acknowledgement video, which is the result of the vision and guidance of the Land Recognition Committee within ASU's Alliance of Indigenous Peoples. While it plays, I'd like to welcome our first speakers to the stage. We have Denisa Livingston, an Indigenous food and health justice organizer, an Indigenous public health consultant, and a community health advocate with the Dine Community Advocacy Alliance. Give her a round of applause. And moderating this discussion, we have Deborah Utasia Kroll, who is an Indigenous Affairs reporter at the Arizona Republic. Give her a round of applause. Could we play the video, please?
Arizona State University is located in Indian country. There are 22 tribal nations in Arizona. ASU's campuses are situated on the homelands of many Indigenous peoples, including the Akimel, O'odham, and Pipash.
Arizona State University recognizes the original inhabitants of these lands
and recognizes that they still reside throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area.
And we recognize the impact of their wisdom and generosity towards us.
If you've flown into the valley, you have undoubtedly seen the Salt River Project canals that surround the area.
Those modern-day canals follow the framework of the canals originally constructed by ancestral Sonoran Desert people, Huhulkam, to make this area both livable and a place where peoples could thrive.
We acknowledge that the modern-day Indigenous nations that descended from the ancestral peoples are the original inhabitants of this land.
Can you hear me now? Okay, we got Verizon here. So I'm going to let Denisa introduce herself. So go for it.
Yate, she Denisa Livingston in the Shaki the cheating in a slant chishin a bashichin, Oze dina a touching in dashache, do nanish edge touching in dashanella. I used to that nasha a telegon wolia, diagot di nishila. Hello, everyone, family, friends, relatives, new friends. My name is Denisa Livingston, and I am from the Red House People Clan and born for the Chiricahua Apache people, and my grandparents are of the Zuni and the Hopi people. And I'm from an area in the Four Corners area in New Mexico, a place called Mitten Rock, which is behind the famous Shiprock Pinnacle. And I'm really excited to be here with you today. Thank you to Food Tank and Danielle and Bernard. The last time I spoke with Food Tank was right before the pandemic at NYU Law School in New York City. And so it's been a while and really excited about today's event. Thank you.
Akish, Namulich Deborah Kroll, and that's the end of my Salinan, sorry to say. I'm an enrolled member of the Hakalum Salinan tribe, also known as the People of the Oaks, from the Central California coast. If you've ever been to Morro Bay, you've been to our sacred place of Lasam, and upland from there and over to the Coast Ranges, the Salinas Valley, the headwaters of the Salinas River, and 2.5 out of the 21 missions. So but I am one of the Indigenous Affairs reporters for the Arizona Republic, where I report on tribal issues ranging from indigenous street food to water issues, environmental issues, commerce issues, what have you. So today we're going to talk about some of Denise's work, and I understand that you are involved in the only governmental ordinance creating a tax on junk food. So would you like to talk about that?
Well, I just am really honored to be here with Deborah because she is our superstar in Indian country, and thank you for all your work in journalism. But just being an auntie here, I should be interviewing her. So just thank you for spending this time with us. Well, back to the Healthy Diné Nation Act of 2014, going to address the unhealthy foods in our communities. And we don't say junk food. We did say that at one point, but we were told there's junk and then there's food. And so also in our language, that didn't even exist. So we had to create the words Ian Bijol, which Ian means food, and Bijol means the crap, the scrap, the unhealthy food, the food that doesn't belong in our body, the food that causes us pain, disease, discomfort, and ailments, and the food that has been given to us by colonizers, and the foods that colonize our food systems. That's what Ian Bijol means. And so since 2014, we've led this work over a decade, as well as tax-free healthy food law, which emphasizes indigenous foods. And as of last year, we've raised over $17 million at partial compliance, which all of those funds go back to the Navajo Nation, 110 chapters, and that goes to fund community wellness projects that address the needs of the social environment, the physical environment of our people, or even what has happened through the pandemic to really supply the PPEs, the mask, the water, the essential needs of our communities. And so that's an ongoing statute that we have. And also it still is the US's only unhealthy foods tax that's led by indigenous peoples. So policy innovation has really been at the forefront of our work.
Well, that's great news, great news. And what got you involved in the healthy food movement?
Yeah, so from time immemorial, our people, as indigenous people across the whole world, have taken care of, have loved, and also have stewarded our seeds, our crops, our animals, our plants, the living beings all around, from the air to the ocean, all around the skies. And this is something that we have always grown up with, that we have lived with, within our songs, within our prayers, within our ceremonies, to be able to see that sacredness a part of who we are, that what we put into our bodies is also sacred, that food is sacred. And the theme of this event is food is medicine. And in Diné, we say, and that is something that is true and wholeheartedly, something that comes from within, something that we breathe. And how I got involved is my grandfather died from direct contamination of uranium when the U.S. government opened uranium mines on Navajo to mine for the atomic bomb during the Cold War era. And to this day, my grandmother's still alive, his wife, which is my mother's mother, my grandma Jessie, who some of you have heard about and that I speak about many times. She had gone to Congress 6 times to raise awareness about the uranium contamination. And to this day, we are still suffering from it. According to the New York Times, several years ago, the radon gas that was emitted from the homes is 900 times over the safety standard. And our people are still living in these homes, also exposed to the water contamination, the air contamination, and then also contaminating our soil. And so the really big issue about our vulnerability of our food systems is how are we going to grow food? How are we going to steward our food systems? And so my grandmother, she led this advocacy work, and when I was doing my Master of Public Health degree at IHS in Shiprock, New Mexico, they voluntold me, volunteer someone to do something, and they said, you're going to go and, do this unhealthy foods tax, not knowing that I'd be up against, industry, from the polar bears, the red and white companies, for these big industries that would hire our own people to lobby against us, that would put us through different threats and risk. And so I took that initiative to be able to step into tribal politics, but also the international politics, because we see this unhealthy food industry attacking our communities on a worldwide level. And also we see the contamination from the products, but also the disease that is caused from these unhealthy foods that is happening with almost everyone that that is in this room or has been impacted or knows somebody that's been impacted by it. So it's a really part of my stewardship and also my life that my grandma has helped us to understand how advocacy is critical, but also in our food system. So my older uncle, Phil Harrison, who's leading the charge in the big, beautiful bill over the summer, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was extended, which Navajo families, but also families across the U.S. Are eligible to be able to receive compensation, because many of our people have passed on from the contamination. And so there are also victims and also their offspring that are still suffering from different diseases and cancers and still incompensable diseases that still need to be addressed at the federal level.
Yeah, it just continues to be an issue. It's like we've written many, many times, they're going to start a new uranium cleanup job, and when are they going to finish it? You know, when is the water going to be clean and pure for people? And one of the things that I've always been very curious about is commodification of our foods. You know, things like foraging, like down in South America, quinoa, which was once consumed by Native peoples, and now the Native peoples down there can't afford it because it's all getting exported up here. Do you see anything like that happening in the Southwest with traditional foods becoming so popular that we're not, we as Native peoples can't afford to buy our own healthy foods?
Yeah, that's a really important point, because we see it happening everywhere, whether it's our food, our clothing, fashion, earrings, shoes, hairstyles, whatever that may be. But the extraction that happens in our community is something that we've seen very much through the pandemic, when we noticed that our food system was even more vulnerable than ever. People were reaching out for seeds, trying to get native seeds. I mean, all of the seed banks were running empty. We practice seed sovereignty, so we were also gifting seeds and trading seeds with other tribes. And we are doing that, underground. We're not, publicizing that or promoting that. But we see that, and an example of that is blue corn. When we go to the local grocery store, it doesn't tell us where the blue corn's coming from. Who's growing the blue corn if we're not growing it? We grow our own blue corn, but who is selling that and who is also distributing that? And it's something that is in extractive practice, because when we usually gift food or grow food or harvest food, forest food, we gift it to one another, but it's not in these huge, big bags and commercially, oversized bags that you wonder, where did all this blue corn come from? And so still to this day, the stores at home, they don't have a label of where it's coming from, who's growing it, if it's non-GMO. And so we usually look to the local tribes around the Ute Mountain Ute. So they have the non-GMO from Bow and Arrow farms. And so they have the non-GMO blue corn, yellow corn, white corn. So we really need to be specific about what we're buying and also what we're gifting to others, and also educating our communities on what that looks like, because that also goes for natural resources. That's being extracted, without permission. And it's a really key thing, because when we look at AI, artificial Indians, this is something that creates artificial intelligence. But when we look at the real deal, the AI American Indians with ancestral intelligence, the more that we educate ourselves, the more that we help, to learn about these stories, the narratives, and the origins of these foods, and why are we promoting them, why are we using them in our Indigenous food sovereignty demonstrations, or even with the schools, really getting to know the essence of that seed and the story of that seed and where that seed came from, because it's also in our creation stories. They come from longer than what we even can imagine, and their journey has journeyed through so much pain and suffering that we have to be thinking about the sacredness of it, and also educating our friends and also our communities on a worldwide scale of what that looks like, so that we're not talking about this here, and instead of encouraging one another, we should be realizing like, hey, this is precious, and the lives that are going to be affected by these seeds are very precious, and the future of Indigenous folks is a precious, but also something stewarded by what we see and by what we eat and what we put in here, our taste memory, our taste buds, our healthy microbiome, everything that comes, with food, is really important when we think about not extracting, not commodifying, and also not commercializing the food system, but making sure that they stay sacred.
Well, thank you for that, yes. So in California, we go, oh. So everyone say, oh. There you go. Very good, very good. Is someone wanting to ask a question? We have 5 minutes, so I think we can.
We don't have a mic for you, so you can ask it after.
Yeah, okay. I had one other thing to ask you, and that is, a lot of what you do sounds like you're enabling people or encouraging people in Dinata to return to the ancestral foods. And just very briefly, how does going back to these traditional ancestral foods, how do they act to enhance human health and enhance our ecology?
Thank you for asking that. Collective healing is really important for us to be able to facilitate opportunities and work with schools, work with programs, not only on the local level, but on the international level. I served as a Slow Food International Counselor of the Global North for over 5 years. And so not only thinking about policy, but policy innovation, taste education, thinking about gastro-colonialism and gastropolitics, getting involved in why we need to share our stories, why we need to return back to our ancestral ways. We look at the global challenges right now of climate change, of fire mitigation, of the floods, but also thinking about how important our grandmas and our grandpas, but also our ancestors had these prophecies. My mom talks about how my grandma had these prophecies about the floods in California. She had never been to California. How did she dream about these floods? And so these prophecies that we see is really important because that addresses the solutions. It addresses the collective healing, the way that we go forward, addressing the global challenges that we see. And it's important that we visualize who we want to be or who we should be in the future. Seeing ourselves as ancestors, not as descendants, but with the responsibility and the stewardship of being an ancestor and what that looks like going forward, and what does healing look like? Because not only do we need to participate in our elders' healing and provide times for them to speak, to be able to share their recipes, to be able to share their visions, and also their prophecies, it's important, that we steward those spaces for the youth too. Taste education, and also getting familiar, what does this food or what does elk or deer smell like? How do we harvest these, natural foods, the sumac, the chichin, the wild onions, looking at all of these traditional foods, ancestral foods that we have around, our area in the Southwest, but also across the world, because we have to remember that we traded with tribes. That was our practice. We bartered with tribes, and we had different seeds, and we had different, the shells that we had, and looking, to our brothers and sisters across the world to have these conversations, because it's our youth that is suffering from these the CRAP, the CRAP, the carbonate refined artificial processed foods, and they need to be saved by that. They need to be, informed that there is healing in their body when they take and partake of these ceremonies and these songs and also these practices, that we're able to see them heal in the process to see that healthy future. Without that, why are we doing the work that we're doing? We can see, that there is a future, but is it going to be for them? Who's that future going to be for? And is it going to be a healthful future for them? So I will pass it back to you because I want to ask you a question because,
Okay.
Deborah, you're our superstar here. What do you see in your current work, that is something that you want to bring, into visibility today?
I think a lot of what you're doing, I definitely want to bring more into visibility. Part of what we call decolonization, it doesn't mean we give up living in houses or having bank accounts, but it means that we return to our foodways as much as possible, our elder ways as much as possible, and our ways of life and living with the land. Because when we have that relationship with the lands and the waters and the flying things and the swimming things, we are more able to care for the earth and to be able to adjust to and mitigate and, God willing, even reverse climate change. Because here in California, we've had at least 100-year long droughts in the last 5,000 years. So if anyone knows how to adapt to drought, it's us. And so I think it's very important that people listen to Native peoples, listen to elders, listen to traditional practitioners. And the other thing is to let Indigenous peoples lead these programs. That you as allies can help us do these, implement these different protocols. But it's important to let Indigenous people be the leaders. And I think we're out of time, so. Well,
Thank you.
this up.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to start this event. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Give them a round of applause as they exit, please. I want to remind us of something that Denisa said. We need to act like we are our own ancestors, or we won't be. So another round of applause. So now I get to invite our partners up to the stage. Kathleen Merrigan of the Sweetie Center for Sustainable Agriculture, or for Sustainable Food Systems. Sorry, give her a round of applause. Sorry. Lindsay Waugh from the Sprouts Healthy Community Foundation. Round of applause. I'm going to move over here. And Tom Pasick, a senior liaison officer for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Thank you all again for your collaboration and your partnership. Tom, if I can start with you, can you tell us a little bit about why this year's World Food Day theme was chosen?
Sure. I'd first like to say how excited I am to be here. And it's my first time here at Arizona State, and I can't believe this campus. It's incredibly impressive. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank our host at the Sweetie Center, Kathleen Merrigan, Suzanne Palmieri, and Arizona State University, as well as our partners in Sprouts, and as well as Food Tank. World Food Day, as many of you probably know, is about scheduling a day once per year to pause in our busy lives and reflect on the state of global hunger and malnutrition, to raise awareness of some of the leading drivers and causes of hunger, but also the solutions to hunger. So really to raise awareness, but also to mobilize action to solve hunger. This year, getting to your question, Danny, this year I think is quite different and special for a variety of reasons. Firstly, it's the 80th birthday or anniversary of the Food and Agriculture Organization for which I work, and that's when World Food Day was first established back on this day in 1945. But more importantly, I think there are a lot of commonalities and similarities between the challenges that our ancestors faced as they came out of World War II and the aftermath. They dealt with extraordinary uncertainty, daunting, unprecedented challenges. For them, nothing was certain. And I think this is true for us here today in terms of the challenges and the reality we're confronted with. Danny mentioned some of these statistics, but I think it bears repeating that tonight some 673 million persons will go to bed hungry. 2.6 billion people at least can't afford to eat a healthy, nutritious diet. So that's fully 1/3 of humanity can't afford to eat healthy, nutritious foods. In addition to that, we're seeing conflicts raging around the world, increasingly extreme and unpredictable weather, which makes the work of farmers harder by the day. We're seeing chronic economic shocks and downturns. As Danny also mentioned, we're seeing soaring malnutrition rates, but also soaring obesity rates, which is another form of malnutrition. And then on top of all this, we're dealing with unprecedented food prices, which again exacerbates the situation and makes it harder for people to afford quality, nutritious, and healthy foods. But I think as we reflect upon the situation of hunger and malnutrition on World Food Day, it's important for us to recognize that there is a lot we can do to change things, that there are solutions at our fingertips, and certainly food is medicine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. Give him a round of applause, please. So Kathleen, Tom talked about the solutions being at our fingertips, and part of why we're here today is about creating partnerships and collaboration. I feel like your whole career has been centered on collaboration and partnership. Do you want to talk about why we're all here and what it means to you?
Sure. Well, I grew up in church. You do let us offer each other the sign of peace. You turn to the left and turn to the right. I almost feel like we should do that in this auditorium because this is a very diverse crowd. I have faculty here from all across campus, not just one school, many
great.
schools. We have members of the community, not just from Phoenix, but around the state, nonprofit partners, Mr. Pickles in the audience. So, it's really incredible. And what I think is brilliant about this is we started with lunch, breaking bread together, and we got to network. And we're going to have a great reception tonight after our breakout groups because it's important to talk.
Yeah.
Why meet in person? You might as well just do Zoom if you're not going to have this connectivity. And so what I'm hoping for from this event is that sparking important conversations on campus and in our neighborhoods about food as medicine. Do I even understand exactly what food as medicine is? I'll tell you, I don't. I'm learning here today too. And there's this national snowballing conversation about it, and I'm glad that here today we're a part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Give her a round of applause. Lindsay, I know it was important to the foundation to reach out to the community, to have so many different partners and collaborate. Can you talk about why food as medicine is something that the foundation wants to focus on and support more of?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having us be a part of this. Sprouts has been doing a series of collaborative events with Food Tank all across the country this year, really taking time to learn, connect, and understand what perspectives are shaping food as medicine conversations. And so as an ASU graduate, it means so much to me to be bringing this conversation back and having it happen in our own backyard. So from where our foundation sits, the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation is truly focused in on nutrition education, nutrition access, and paying attention to how nutrition has impact on long-term health outcomes. And so what I'm excited about today is the diversity of partners and stakeholders that are here in this room, and the way that we create a patchwork of different perspectives, ideas, resources for how we can really work together. I think it's sparked through experiences like this. So I'm excited to see what comes from this and the role that we and our partners can play in it.
Thank you so much. This is going to be a great event. Give these partners a round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so now we get to have our first fireside chat of the day. We have Pierre Tam, who is a James Beard award-winning chef, author, and social activist who founded Yolele Foods. He's a great friend of Food Tank. Give Pierre a round of applause, please. And moderating this session, we have Claire Mioiga, the agriculture and water reporter for the Arizona Republic. Give her a round of applause.
What is food?
Food is life,
Food is memory,
roots,
land.
and the knowledge of our ancestors,
Food is a right.
not a privilege.
80 years ago, the world made a promise.
To grow, share,
Feed communities.
and live better through food. This World Food Day,
Let's all walk together hand in hand.
honor traditions,
Cultivate innovation
harvest a better future.
to leave no one behind.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to see you, Pierre.
Happy to see you.
So, Pierre, in 2017, you started commercializing a grain that has been farmed in West Africa for
5,000 years plus,
5,000 years.
oldest cultivated grain in Africa.
And it's a grain that has multiple properties, but most importantly, it's something that you love to cook with, right?
Yes, it's a great grain, very versatile, easy to cook with, cooks in 5 minutes, gluten-free. And there's a saying, Fonio never embarrasses the cook, so that's why I love to cook with it.
I'll have to try it one day. I want us to start by, well, if you can start by talking about your relation to this grain as a chef. You've mentioned that you were, you had to look for substitutes for your kitchen while you were, like cooking for people in New York City and didn't have this grain. But then you not only brought it like for yourself, but you commercialized it, you brought it to the public, to the chefs. So tell me, what did it mean to you sharing it? And what do you think are the most important effects of what you just did there?
Well, it means the world to me, because early in my career as a chef in New York City, coming from West Africa, Senegal, I found that the so-called food capital of the world was missing my whole part of the world. Africa was absent of that world, and to me it was something that needed to be corrected. I appreciated all those cuisines, French, Italian, English, Japanese, English. And eventually, I thought, Mexicans, there we go, and Native Americans, even though we didn't have access to that as well. But to me, it was an opportunity. The food that I grew up with in Senegal was like this beautiful diversity of cuisine. Senegal is a coastal country, and it's like the entrance of Africa, so it's really a melting pot of cuisines from West Africa, but also the colonial French have brought their cuisines, the Portuguese in the south have brought their cuisines, so all of that makes a wonderful pastiche, and to me it was an opportunity to bring it. And eventually, studying my cuisines, my restaurant, my catering, writing my first cookbook, I had to think of substitutions for ingredients, because many of the ingredients that really made like cuisine special was not accessible to my audience. So instead of bringing substitutions that really wouldn't make it the same thing, I started to think about ways to not only make those ingredients accessible to market, but also to have an impact and support the smallholder farmers communities that have been growing these crops for thousands of years, for millennia. And one ingredient particularly caught my attention is this ancient grain called Fonio. And Fonio has been cultivated in the southeast part of Senegal. In Dakar, the city where I grew up, you don't even see Fonio. You didn't see Fonio at the time. And that really bothered me. How come a grain that's not only grows in poor soil, that restores the soil, that's a grain that's drought resistant, a grain that's very nutritious, rich in fibers, it's a grain that has a low glycemic index, so it's good, it's recommended for diabetics and all that. And that grain is not even accessible. It's like, to me, it didn't make sense, and it was disappearing. So I was like, let me figure out a way to bring that grain to the market, and eventually, by branding it, eventually, that would bring interest for the consumers, not only in the US, but back in Senegal as well. So that was really the idea behind it. And I had no idea that it would require recreating a value chain from this grain. And that's really what happened. I started Yolele, which is the name of the company. And today, we started by distributing the grain in 2017 at one Whole Foods in New York City. And eventually, it took off. And today we are distributed across the U.S. and all the Whole Foods and some other supermarkets are distributing it, and it's getting a regain even in West Africa as well, where in Senegal you can see Fonio in cities like Dakar, where I grew up. So that was very important to me, and Fonio was just one example. There's like many other crops that are there that don't have access to market, and eventually we need to figure out a way to create a value chain and bring them to market. So that was, to me, something that was key than just cooking in the kitchen.
What a journey.
Quite a journey.
I want to ask just a quick follow-up on that. You said that it's also helped commercialize more the grain in Senegal?
Yes, it helped commercialize Fonio in Senegal. Now in supermarkets in Dakar or even in regular markets, you can see now Fonio, there's a demand for that. You know, it's a grain that has not only, it's delicious, it's very versatile, like I mentioned earlier, but it has lots of properties as well. You know, I've been inspired by the story of quinoa, and this is really the thing that you see with Fonio. It has lots of parallels, this gluten-free, considered superfoods grain, and now you see a demand for that, for these ancient grains in Senegal as well as here in America. So that's really been happening.
That's great news. I want you to speak a little bit about the aggregation centers that community members, the small-scale farmers in West Africa have been organizing. I don't know how much Yolele was part of, like how much you incentivize that, but I understand that you're not involved in it. Just tell me about the centers, and if you could talk a little bit about the diversified agricultural systems that you have there and how that fits into your company's vision.
Oh, actually, we are very much involved with it, actually. We don't own the aggregation centers. We help organizing them, but they're owned by the communities. So what happened is, as we started promoting Fonio and creating a demand for it, eventually we went from having Fonio grains to having Fonio pilafs to now having even Fonio chips in the market. And the most important part, we knew to really have an impact, we had to introduce the grain to other industries. And that's what we did with the brewery industry, because to make a beer, you need to have grains. So we started talking with Brooklyn Brewery, this wonderful master brewer, Garrett Oliver, and we said, hey, you could really have an impact by starting to use Fonio in your beer. And he tried it, and it turns out it's a wonderful beer. And so he was like, we could really try to make this happen. And with Brooklyn Brewery, they had a crew. We went to Senegal. We filmed farmers growing Fonio, and we just did a small documentary on how the impact of Fonio beer could be in West Africa. And eventually today we have this, what's called Brewing for Impact, with Brooklyn Brewery, Guinness, Carlsberg is about to launch a Fonio beer. There's dozens of breweries around the world, in Kirin in Japan, in China there's one brewery as well. So that demand was there now. We created a demand. We wanted to make sure we can satisfy the demand. And that meant going back to the farming communities and support the farmers. It was very important to create these aggregation centers, because one thing we learned from quinoa, and we wanted to make sure we didn't want to be the next quinoa. We didn't want this success of Fonio to be something that happens outside of the communities. We wanted the farmers who grew Fonio, who's been growing Fonio for thousands of years, to be the ultimate beneficiaries. And for that to happen, they had to have a system around the aggregation centers that supports them, that equips them, that just provides them with like the seeds, the warehousing, and the market. And therefore, that aggregation center would be run and operated by the farmers. They will be supplying the communities, they will be supplying the industries, they will be supplying the breweries, they will be supplying eventually the other food companies around the world. So that was the idea. The vision is we can integrate these ancient crops and to the market with the support of even corporations. They can play a role. Everyone could play a role and have an impact, as long as the community remains the deliverable and the farmers are the ones who are the ultimate beneficiaries.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's my next question. But just this really scaled up. And is it like If anyone wants to look later at Yolele's website, you'll have more context of what I'm saying here. But it's a very big farming area, right? Like, is it all the way from Senegal to Sudan?
Yeah, to Chad. Fonio grows from Senegal to Chad. It grows really easily. You know, they call it the lazy farmer's crop. That's why it's been around. It's very resilient. All the farmers, all they have to do is throw the seeds when the first rain comes, and they guarantee to have a harvest within 2 months. So that's really a fascinating grain, and it's a miracle grain. But again, you know, it's been happening for 5,000 years, but still they didn't have access to market. It was just a subsistence grain. It was a grain that farmers would use because not only it grows so fast, so in seasons where the rain is inconsistent, like what we have now with climate change, they know they can rely on Fonio. But now imagine now to go from subsistence grain to bringing economic opportunities for those farmers. So then you have a win-win-win. The farmers are winning from this grain. They also have access to markets, so they're winning. The environment is winning because that's a grain that's grown in a regenerative way. It restores the soil. It has deep roots that add nutrients to the soil. And the consumers around the world too are winning because, again, when you look at our health, we're talking about food is medicine. The problem we're having, most of the chronic diseases that we're dealing with are connected to the lack of diversity in our diet. So if you can add crops like Fonio in our diet and many others that have been ignored by our food system, then the consumers are winning as well. So this is just a great way to look at how to switch the food system by integrating small farmers and their underutilized crops.
Okay, and back to not becoming a cash crop. You also work as a consultant. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, like guardrails, policies that you see would be very helpful in making sure that the communities that store these crops don't get affected by, you know, a superfood trend?
Well, yes, that's the example I was trying to tell you about the quinoa situation. Quinoa is this grain that was cultivated by the Andes, the Chilean, the Peruvian farmers for thousands of years, and eventually it became so successful, but the farmers in quinoa, in those regions couldn't support the market. The demand was so high, and you started to see intensive farming in places like Texas or Montana or even Ukraine. They started to grow in quinoa in an intensive way, and the farmers in Chile couldn't compete with that. This was just a situation that we didn't want to see happening with Fonio. So we had to not only support the farmers through the aggregation centers, but had to also work at the policy level to have governments supporting, even like bringing policies like the appellations of Fonio, for instance. You cannot call it Fonio if it's not grown by smallholder farmers in the region of West Africa, for instance. That's one example. Supporting even the transfer of seeds. You cannot bring the seeds outside of the region unless it's for research. You know, if it comes to a university like Arizona State, that's fine. But if it's going to go and become these seeds for farmers in Montana, that's not going to be the thing. So it needs to be protected by policymakers. So that's one thing that we are working on to make sure this remains a crop that benefits the development of those regions. Those regions are among the poorest ones in the world, and that's an opportunity that we really don't want to miss.
Are you getting close?
Well, it's an uphill battle we're fighting, and the interest is growing. So the more we have exposure for these grains like Fonio, the more appetite from also those other big food, like you call them, is happening too. So it's an uphill battle, and we're fighting for it, but we believe in it, and we have no choice.
Yeah, there's no choice. So what is something that we can all do, you know, to bring out the best of this, out of this superfood trend and food is medicine hype?
Well, it shouldn't remain a trend. It should be a way of life. We need to really return to the way we've been feeding ourselves for 5,000 years plus. Until 50 years ago, we changed our our diet, we change our approach to feeding ourselves. We need to diversify our diet, and we can do it 3 times a day if we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if we are part of the lucky ones who have that. And that's an opportunity to diversify, to return to real food, simple food. You know, again, Fonio is one, but there are thousands of others. There are 7,000 species, plant species, food that are remaining right now. I mean, I heard 70% of our biodiversity has disappeared, or more than that already. So if we don't consume it, it continues to disappear. So everyone has a role to play. Everyone can make a change at breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay, so we still have 2 minutes.
Do a call to action?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very powerful call to action. I would love if you can talk a little bit to us about your cooking, about your cuisine.
My cuisine is inspired by West African cuisine, so it's, again, real food, very, very simple. At my restaurant in New York City, I try to bring dishes that transcend the colonial borders. Again, that also has a role in my cuisine too. It's like a way to decolonize it. So I transcend those borders because in West Africa, or in all over Africa, those borders are not real. They've been imposed upon us, drawn in Berlin sometime in the 1800s. But when you see the food that I eat in Senegal and the food that you see in Nigeria or in Cote d'Ivoire or in Mali, there are similarities, and in that diversity, there's still similarities. And at the restaurant Teranga in New York City, this is how I present my food. So the customer can come and see and choose between a fermented cassava couscous or fonio, jollof fonio. Jollof is like this famous recipe that you see across Nigeria, Senegal. Every one of those countries are fighting to make the best jollof. Obviously, Senegalese are the original jollof ones, but Nigerians would die for it. So it's just it's a war. I'm not sure if you heard of the jollof war. So it's real, but that's the best type of wars because no one dies from it. It's like a war that's like really a symbol of unity, really. And that's what my food is. I really want my food to be representing that region of the world, and I want also my food to be a way to foster understanding and bring my culture to the rest of the world, to America in that case.
And we'll get to try some of that at the reception. So
yes.
Anyway, round of applause for Pierre. Thank you so much, Pierre.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful conversation. As somebody who has had fonio in Senegal around this time last year, it's a delicious food. I encourage you to buy it and eat it. It's really easy to cook. Another huge thanks to Chef Pierre and Clara. Clara mentioned that you'll be eating some of a dish from Pierre's repertoire later. There will be a tasting station featuring a fonio pilaf, so that'll be great. Before we continue, I'm excited to share that we have signed copies of Pierre's book, Simply West African, Easy, Joyful Recipes for Every Kitchen. If you look under your desks, some of you will find a fruit or vegetable sticker. So your desks on the side, go ahead, look. If you find a fruit or vegetable sticker, I'll give you a few minutes to find it. If you find one of those, find a food tank team member later and exchange it for one of those signed copies. So it's really exciting. Kenzie will give it to you when she can. Any other stickers? Anybody find one? All right, you can find Kenzie later if she doesn't get to you right now, but we're going to go ahead and continue. In our next session, we're going to take a deep dive into the current food policy landscape and what it means for efforts to protect and expand nutrition security. So joining us, we have Crystal Fitzsimons, the president of the Food Research and Action Center, also known as FRAC. Give her a round of applause. And bringing back to the stage, Kathleen Merrigan of the Sweetie Center to moderate this conversation. Before I let them continue, we have a video to share with you from former from U.S. Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona here, who wanted to participate in the summit today but couldn't make it for obvious reasons. So give that a round of applause.
Hi everyone, Senator Ruben Gallego here. Thank you to the Food and Agriculture Organization, ASU's Swette Center, the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation, and Food Tank for bringing us together for World Food Day. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about an issue that means a lot to me, making sure families have access to the food assistance programs they need. Growing up, I was a free lunch kid. My mom worked incredibly hard to raise 4 of us on her own, but there were times when the money just didn't stretch far enough to cover both a roof over our heads and food on the table. So knowing her kids would get a meal at school was a huge relief for her, and for me and my sisters. That lunch tray meant we could focus on being kids instead of worrying about whether we get to eat that day. That's why I've fought so hard to protect programs like SNAP, because I know firsthand how important they are for keeping families healthy. So I was very furious to see Republicans cut funding for SNAP in the budget bill they passed this summer. Those cuts would take away food from more than 63,000 Arizona families, making it harder for kids who grew up like me to stay healthy and fed. Not only will these cuts make Americans hungrier, but make people sicker and poorer as well, because when people can't afford to eat, their health suffers. Adults on SNAP spend about $1,400 less a year in medical costs than those who qualify but don't receive benefits. That's proof that food is medicine, and that's why we should be expanding access to food assistance, not cutting it. In Congress, I have pushed legislation like the EATS Act, which would help college students access SNAP benefits, and the Universal School Meals Program Act, which would make free school meals available for all families. I'm going to keep fighting for policies that help families put food on the table, stay healthy, and build a better future. Because when we invest in food assistance, we're investing in healthier communities. So happy World Food Day, and look forward to continuing this work together.
Something. Ooh, there we go. That was a good kickoff, actually, Crystal, for our conversation. So if you don't know FRAC is one of these fierce advocacy organizations fighting against hunger for nutrition assistance in our nation's capital, and I follow everything they do. So as organizers, we didn't want to host a summit on food as medicine in a bubble, you know, without conversation about some of the harsh realities of what's going on today. And the senator maybe took a little of your thunder, Krista, but what should people know about what's going on? Can you just update us?
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for having me here today. It's really great to be in conversation and in community with you all. Well, so as many of you probably know, and the senator alluded to when he spoke, they made significant cuts to the SNAP program. And for those of you who are not familiar with the SNAP program, it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It was the new name. It used to be called food stamps like 20 years ago. And it really is our nation's lifeline fighting hunger. We have 42 million people in this country who rely on that program to put food on the table, including kids, parents, seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, so it really does, communities across the country rely on that program. So last summer, Congress decided to cut it by about 20%, or close to $200 billion. And that is a significant cut. And the way it is going to play out is that millions of families, millions of people are either going to lose benefits completely, or they're going to see their benefit level cut. And so there's a whole group of people who had not been required to meet these time limits, which FRAC has always opposed, but requiring older adults and veterans and people transitioning out of foster care and people who are unhoused would now be covered by these time limits, where they would have to demonstrate and do a lot of paperwork to show that they were working or volunteering for 20 hours a week. And we fear that many people will lose their benefits because of that. It was the first time, and I think it's really important to think about this, thinking about the fact that we're, going back to 1945, they actually took away SNAP benefits from our humanitarian immigrants. So most immigrants are not eligible for SNAP, but we've always wanted to provide support to our humanitarian immigrants, our refugees, our asylees, people of domestic violence, people who have been sex trafficked, have always had access to SNAP. That has been taken away as well. And then one of the other big things that they did was they actually are transitioning for the first time costs of benefits to states. And so we're really worried about how that's going to play out for states, because if they have to cover these costs, they are going to have to look at their state budgets and figure out whether or not they should increase taxes or cut other programs, and it's going to be putting programs that are really important, like education, against Medicaid and against SNAP. And so we really see this bill as kind of a call to action of what we want our country to look like. And in FRAC's opinion, we really do not want people to be hungry. We want people to have access to the food that they need and a healthy diet with dignity. So that's kind of what's happened in the budget reconciliation bill last summer. I did want to lift up two positive things, because I always like to focus on a little bit of the positive. And one is there is a tremendous movement for healthy school meals for all, which really does make sure that all kids in school have access to the food that they need and are able to learn and focus and concentrate. And at this point, we actually have 9 states, New York became the last one last summer, who have a statewide policy to offer free breakfast and lunch to all of their students in school. And then we actually have about 60% of schools across the country who are offering free meals to all their students. And then with WIC, we were able to maintain full funding through the appropriations bill on the Senate side, so that we're hopeful that we'll be able to maintain WIC and the fruits and vegetable and the funding that supports that program. So there are a few positive things, but we do actually have a long road ahead fighting back on some of these challenges that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you for that. So I can't believe I get to be the first person to say this. I don't think you said it earlier today, Danny, the expression, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? We're all familiar with that. And instinctively, I think we all sort of agree with it, understand it at some level, that good food can keep us healthy. But I want to talk about the economics of hunger, I suppose. Can we put this notion into dollars and cents? Have you encountered any economic data that underscores the value of good food as proactive healthcare that saves money?
Yeah, so I would start by saying that the cost of food insecurity and hunger in this country is about $160 billion annually in direct and indirect healthcare costs. So those are real costs that our country pays. SNAP, if you participate in SNAP, your healthcare costs are estimated to be about $1,400 less per person. WIC, which serves pregnant women, postpartum women, and young children and infants, that actually has been shown to reduce healthcare costs significantly as well. For every dollar that we spend on WIC, it actually reduces the immediate birth costs to Medicaid by somewhere between $1.77 and $3.13. So that actually is a pretty significant financial impact, in addition to the fact that we're getting healthier babies who are going to grow up to be healthier. And then there was actually a great study that came out a year or two ago from Tufts, which actually looked at the value of healthy school meals for all in Massachusetts. And they found and predicted that that policy, by making sure that kids had access to breakfast and lunch at school, would actually save the state about $157 million annually in healthcare costs and productivity as well.
Wow. You're like a walking data bank. That's really impressive. Okay. So I don't think any of us can keep up with you and FRAC on food insecurity data. You guys own that space. I bow to your mastery. But even on a college campus, and many of us are faculty here, I find that data only goes so far, that stories of real people and their experiences, putting that face on the data really helps us absorb it, process the information. You know, I really heard the story of Senator Gallego's hunger, food insecurity as a child, and I'll remember that for a long time. So do you have a story or two to share that with us that relates to food as medicine to help us think this whole issue about, think it through?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would just start by saying, school meals, there's research out there that shows that they are some of the healthiest meals that kids are eating. Kids get higher nutrients that they need. And so they're really important in supporting health. And they do serve about 30 million kids across the country on an average school day. And so healthy school meals for all is kind of an approach that we've been working on for a long time at FRAC. And one story that actually has stayed with me for probably 15 years, because we've been on a long march towards free school meals for all. We got a call at FRAC from a grandma who was raising her granddaughter. And they were in Michigan, and the granddaughter had just started school. And she got through the first week of school, participated in school lunch, and at the end of the week, she got to the end of the lunch line, and the lunch lady took the lunch away from her and threw it into the trash because she had accrued unpaid school meal debt. The school had not yet processed her school meal application, so she was actually eligible for free school meals. And that is a common thing. And there's a lot of pressure on schools to break even within the school cafeteria for sure. And so a lot of schools may not offer meals to kids who either don't have cash in hand or money in their account. And that story was happening quite a bit, and we did hear it. And you actually can't take that back. Like the message that you send to a child that you would rather put the food in the trash than let the child eat it is just outrageous. And there's a lot of pressure on schools there. But those kinds of stories, which actually were going viral before the pandemic, really drove the conversation about healthy school meals for all. Because, kids are in school for 6 hours a day. We all know they need access to food. Any parent knows what happens when their kid doesn't eat. And we need to make sure that kids have the nutrition they need to focus and learn and concentrate in school. But that story really does help tell the story about why it makes sense to feed all kids and make sure they have access to it. So that's one story I would lift up. And on the SNAP front, we do spend a lot of time collecting stories from people. And there was actually one really moving story that we collected from a parent in Tennessee, a single parent who talked about how they felt like they were just drowning in trying to make ends meet, drowning in trying to put food on the table, and that when they were able to participate in SNAP, it gave them a bit of a lifeline where they were able to pay their rent, they were able to buy slightly healthier food, and it really did make a huge difference for them. So, the federal nutrition programs, they're boring to think about, although I spend a lot of time thinking about them. But they really do have this huge impact on people's life every day, and they really do help keep hunger at bay and improve nutrition and health for people.
Great, thank you. So we're sitting here in the College of Global Futures. By the way, there are some chairs down here for people who are standing. You just walk and take a chair if you want. And it's a little uncomfortable for me to talk about this, but I must. So some of my grad students a couple years ago did an in-depth study on food insecurity in the College of Global Futures, and they found that 27% of students reported being food insecure. I'm sure, that tracks with a well-cited Hope Center study that said 30% of students in four-year institutions are food insecure at some point in their studies. I find this conversation hard to navigate with people. I have actually had pushback. People say, well, if they can afford college tuition, they should be able to afford ramen noodles. I had ramen noodles when I was a student, and I'm fine. Help me with this pushback. Give me some words.
Yeah, I think I've talked to some of those same people too, actually. But I find it's really helpful to tell the story and paint the picture of what is really going on. So on the one hand, it's actually really positive. We have more people in college who come from poverty, who come from, our first generation students in college. But food insecurity in college students, not surprisingly, kind of mirrors what's going on in the rest of the world. Kids who have transitioned out of foster care are more likely to experience food insecurity in college. Students of color are more likely to experience it. Students who are parents are more likely to experience it. Students who grew up in poverty or were food insecure are more likely to experience it in college. And so it is real. People do have it. We need to do a better job of making sure that students in college are able to access the supports that they need, which includes SNAP, and if they're parents, the child nutrition programs and WIC. Because the worst thing that can happen, because kids do drop out of college, I guess they're not really kids, but I'll call them kids. They drop out of college because of financial pressure. And then you have the worst case scenario possible, which is where they have student debt and they don't have their degree. So we need to be doing everything we can to support students who are in college so that they graduate and they can, take the promise of higher income and all of that comes with a college degree.
Yes. Good. Okay, this is my last question for you. There's the world as it is, and then there's the world as it could be. Leave us with some inspiration, perhaps a call to action as well. If you were given a magic wand, how could this conversation about food as medicine bring about system change, transformation of our food systems? What's on your mind?
Well, I would say if I had a magic wand, I would wave it and I would make it the vision that we have at FRAC, and I think a lot of people in this room have as well. And that is that everybody has access to a healthy diet with dignity. And, in order to do that, there's lots of different policy levers that you can pull. But I think that's where we need to start. We need to start with the vision that we have for our country, and we need to be talking about it, because the conversation that's happening in DC is not a conversation that has that vision for sure. And we need to be talking about what we want, that we don't want people to be hungry in the United States, that we want people to be able to access healthy food, that we don't want people to have chronic disease and everything else that goes along without having the healthy food that you need. So, I would recommend, increasing SNAP benefits. You increase SNAP benefits, the quality of the food increases that families are able to purchase, free school meals for all. All kids are able to then experience the health and educational benefits that are linked to participating in school meals. WIC, having healthy moms and healthy babies, I think is really, really important. Having healthy meals at child care centers and summer food sites and summer EBT, and making it easier and more accessible, and ensuring that there's no stigma to access the food that you need and everybody's able to do that. So there's lots of things that we can do. I would also say that, there is a link between wealth and health, and we need to also be thinking about how to combat poverty. We need people to have livable wages. We need to have guaranteed basic income. We need to think about our tax system and making sure that it's as fair as possible. Earned income tax credits and child tax credits and all those core pieces, I think, will help support families. But I think we really need to focus on the vision that we have, and we all need to work together to achieve it.
That's great. And I will add something there. For many people here, they know I'm essentially a creature of Washington, D.C. And while I have pushed some agenda there, and I'm proud of some of the stuff I've done, a lot of innovation doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. It happens out in the countryside. Right. So we've got people here today who, at the reception, for example, could be standing around one of those round cocktail tables and come up with a really great new idea to pilot. We don't have to say what is needs to be always what is. We can be imaginative. We can be in collaboration, in community, as you started your talk, and do some great things here in our hood. All right, let me thank Crystal for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you both so much. That was amazing. And I love the vision that Crystal laid out, living wages, universal school meals, no one left behind. That's the kind of world and kind of country we want. I'm now really excited to welcome to the stage Arnett Duncan, who will be sharing his story with us. Arnett is a fourth-generation farmer, the owner of Duncan Family Farms, and a leader in organic and sustainable agriculture. I know he's been practicing with the food tank team. He has a solid 6 minutes that I'm going to keep him to, but please welcome him to the stage. And before, sorry, 1 minute, but let me introduce this. Before he gets here, we're going to hear from the Mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego. Now a round of applause.
Hello, I'm Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, and I'm so happy to welcome you all to our region. Phoenix has rich agricultural roots born out of the ancient canal systems of the Hohokam people. We owe our existence to the fertile grounds of the Salt River watershed. Today, though the valley is booming with advanced manufacturing, biomedicine, and other innovative industries, we're working to honor our agricultural roots and ensure residents' access to fresh, healthy food. We're supporting the development of water-efficient urban farming, expanding community and backyard gardens, cutting food waste at restaurants and schools, and bolstering the network of local food producers and distributors. The City of Phoenix is lucky to have an incredible food systems team and many local partners, including ASU. Thanks to Sprouts, headquartered in Phoenix, and many local food producers and distributors who work every day to expand access to healthy food and support our local food economy. Thanks to Food Tank and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization for meeting here in the Valley. Wishing you all a productive conference.
I always thought the organic movement was horse shit. Now I know it is. My wife Kathleen and I farm out west of Goodyear, and we're right around Perryville Prison. We lease ground from the State Land Department. And in the early 90s, we had the opportunity to lease an entire section of ground right next to where we were already farming. So we jumped on that opportunity. And in addition to the 600 plus acres of production ground, there was this corner that Kathleen wanted to fix up and open to the public, invite kids out from different schools. And so we cleaned this whole corner up. There's also an office and an old market there. And kids started coming out. And without going into too much detail, there's rain events that happen. Kids are still trying to come out. Anyways, somehow we ended up with this, and we have to have kids. We have to have animals for kids. And so we have a petting zoo, because every farm has to have animals, even if it's a vegetable farm. So rain events, we were cleaning the stalls out. We end up with this pile. So it became known on the farm as the big ass pile. And it just got put out in back. And so we also, Kathleen wanted to start a garden because kids really do believe broccoli can be grown on trees. So we wanted to demonstrate how things were grown. So the pile is out back, and of course it's in the wrong place, and so we move it. It's wet, it's got manure in it. We end up moving it quite a few times, and quite by accident, it sort of turns into compost. Now we have this garden. Garden's just this weedy little patch of, oh my God, it needs help. And so my guys were asking me, what do you want to do to fertilize this thing? So we're talking it out, and I just said, you know what? Let's just take the big ass pile and put it on there. So fast forward to a couple of months later, and we put probably 3, 4, 5 inches of compost on these garden beds. But the plants that came out of it were absolutely beautiful. When we harvested it, the fruits, vegetables were amazing. Vibrant colors, incredible texture, magnificent flavor, everything to the superlatives that you could ever think of. And I looked at that and just thought, man, we need to be in composting. So I asked around, and I knew that we need a really large source of raw material. Found out about this horse racing facility in North Phoenix called Turf Paradise. So I approached them. called the manager up, made an appointment, go to sit down with him, and he says, okay, who are you and what do you want? I said, well, here's who I am, and I said, and I'd really like to see if you could bring all of your horse stall cleanings out to our farm. We'd like to have you drop it off in rows and we'll compost it. And this guy looks at me and he says, get the hell out. I'm sorry, I didn't see this conversation going this way. And he says, who put you up to this? Jerry? Fred? I don't think it's funny. And I said, I don't know Jerry or Fred. And so anyway, we get through this very awkward introduction and realize that he has a lot of stuff that he needs to get rid of. We'd really like to have it. So we set up an opportunity for them to bring their product out to us. So he tells me it's about 7 loads a day. He did not tell me, however, that he had a mountain of this stuff sitting there. And he starts delivering, and it's about 15 trucks a day coming day and night. And pretty quickly, they fill up this 30-acre yard that we had set up for composting. So then they started lining it up all around the fields. Anyway, I needed help. So we ended up buying some really big equipment, and as soon as I started composting, people started to approach me about the compost. And this one guy in particular says, you need to talk to Dr. Vicki Bess. So I contacted Dr. Bess, and she started helping me through. She's a soil expert, composting expert, and she helped me through the process. And it taught me how to be better with soils. Composting became the way for us to farm. It fixed things on the farm. And we started farming organically. And to this day, we're now 100% organic in Arizona. We farm in Oregon, we farm in New York. We're 100% organic everywhere we go. We attract really talented people who are absolutely wonderful to work with. We're still farming in the same place in Arizona, only now there's absolutely no conventional production methods associated with it. And we all eat really good shit at the end of the day. Thanks, everybody.
Nice job. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Arnett. Oh, that was great. And he kept on time. I'm so excited. I am now, sorry, you get to enjoy some of what Arnett grows at the reception later. So a salad with ingredients from Duncan Family Farms will be available. So give that a round of applause, everyone. Awesome. In our next session, I get to sit down with Selena Ahmed, who is the Global Director of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative at the American Heart Association. Give her a round of applause. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you.
Danny, it's so great to see you. And as I was coming to this event and telling my daughter where I was going, saying it was World Food Day, and she's like, but we eat food every day. Shouldn't every day be World Food Day? And I was thinking, absolutely, those of us who work in food systems, it is. But you, Danny, more than anybody else I know, and your team at Food Tank really celebrate World Food Day every single day with the connections that you build, the awareness, and the solutions and the hope that you give globally. So such an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. All right, so the Periodic Table of Food Initiative sounds very complex and very scary. Tell us what it is.
It is indeed very complex. It's not scary, though. The Periodic Table of Food Initiative has a North Star that many of us, I think, have, which is how do we achieve healthy diets from sustainable food systems for all? And the way that we're doing that is in a very complex way, and hopefully we will ultimately translate it in ways that are simple. The way that we're doing that is by measuring food the way we measure medicine. And so for lots of history, we have had a really close relationship with food as medicine. In really the 20th and 21st century, that relationship shifted in many communities. And the way we measure food really has had a standstill the way it was in the 1950s. We're still really measuring food the way we did in the 1950s with a limited knowledge of a handful of nutrients, really focusing our entire food system on those nutrients, on yield. But food is far more complex, far more diverse than that. And what we're doing is elucidating that, really utilizing those tools, those multi-omics tools that have been utilized in medicine, and now applying it to understand our food. So yes, we have a very basic question we ask, which is, what is in our food? It's 2025, and we're still trying to figure that out. Very simple question. The second question is, how does that vary based on how food is grown? So we've heard some beautiful agricultural practices being celebrated today. One of the questions that we're asked the most is, does organic food or regenerative agriculture result in more nutrient-dense foods? We're answering that question through these standardized tools that we've developed. And then the third question is, does it matter for human health? So the same multi-omics tools that we've developed for understanding what is in our food, we've also standardized for looking at human serum as well as fecal matter. So we can have food, nutrition, and clinical interventions that make those linkages between food as well as human health. And we can also apply them to looking at the soil microbiome, so then we can make those connections from farm to food to blood.
It's so interesting and so cool. And Food Tank got to be at the launch of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, since that launch about a year and a half ago, how the PTFI, as it's known, it has evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first 4 years of our initiative, we were just developing these multi-omics tools, the metabolomics tools to look at the 27,000 bioactive components that have anti-inflammatory properties, the 3,000 lipid species that have different health impacts for our metabolism, looking at the 60 different unique fiber components that each have a different function in our body. So we had developed those tools, and we had started applying them for an initial data set of commonly consumed foods. Since then, we have grown the ability for labs around the world to utilize and onboard those tools, so really understanding local food systems globally. And our goal by 2030 is to be participating, collaborating with 100 labs to really build this knowledge of underutilized crops of their local food systems. Data, as I was mentioned before by Dr. Merrigan, is just part of the equation. It's only so far that data can go. And so what we've really done in the past year and a half is think, how do we take this very complex data and begin to actually apply it for those hopeful solutions that Food Tank one day will celebrate? And one of those is through collaboration and through partnership. So one of the initiatives and collaborations that I'm so excited that we're working with is with Alameda County's Recipes for Health program. It's a food is medicine intervention where we are co-creating a food quality framework for seeing how do growing practices impact the quality, the nutrient density, as well as diversity of produce prescription programs, and what are the implications for human health. And so not just treating all apples the same, but really saying their growing practices impact that biomolecular composition. And we hear a lot about nutrient density. I also want to elevate the concept of nutrient diversity and biomolecular diversity. We know that biodiversity is so fundamental for planetary health, and often when we're thinking about food, we forget about that. But with the Sustainable Development Goals, dietary diversity has really been celebrated as a key component of dietary quality. And now we have this opportunity to see how this biomolecular diversity that is linked to the diversity of the soil organic matter actually can upregulate that diversity and feed our gut microbiome. So I'm really excited for those practical applications and collaborations that we're having. Another big sort of tool that we're working on to translate this biomolecular data is a platform called Swette Smart. We've just started building it. It takes all of this complex data, integrates it with sensory data, ecological data, ecological footprint data, cost data, and then the goal is to collaborate with school meals, chefs, as well as food enterprises to design foods that are healthier and really have those functional attributes for all. And so really going back to the root of food is medicine, where food was nourishing, how do we bring that back and design foods for those health attributes?
It's so exciting, and you've talked about nutrient diversity and biomolecular diversity. One of the things I appreciate most about the PTFI is the diversity of thought and leadership, and how you're democratizing research really across the globe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So human capacity and capacity strengthening is really core to our model. We are really developing the tools and then providing them open access along with the data, as well as open access training to build capacity globally and really have that partnership. So we have presence with laboratories and institutions on each continent, and really supporting and building the capacity of those scientists, as well as practitioners, to generate this knowledge, integrate it with other ways of knowing, including ancestral wisdom, to really bring solutions that are place-based and culturally relevant.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's also so much potential for the PTFI to change farming practices, to help encourage more sustainable, more resilient farming practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was saying, one of that key question that we're asked is, does regenerative agriculture, does organic agriculture or agroforestry result in more nutrient-dense foods? And how do we actually build that evidence? Scientifically, so many of the studies that have been done around the world use different methodology, so we can't actually harmonize that data, and so we don't have evidence at scale. So by having that standardized methodology that we've developed, we can actually now begin to integrate that data and have evidence at scale, so we can really answer that question. And the data that we are seeing, the learnings from the different partners that we work with, is that it really depends based on geography, based on growing practice, based on the specific crop. And so there's so many complex variables to bring in as we're really beginning to understand. But we're also starting to work and thinking about how do we use this knowledge for crop breeding. So all the way upstream, we can think about choosing the seeds that are the most nutrient dense, that have that greatest nourishment, and then designing the farming practices around that. And there's certain farming practices we can also begin to test. So some might be more laborious, but actually result in really high nutrient density, and others might be also very laborious, but might not be making as much of a difference. In addition to the good things that we're measuring in food, we're also measuring the bad things, the toxins, the heavy metals. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity to really elucidate that knowledge of and really cleaning up our food supply so it is healing.
Sure. Selena, when you're talking about the PTFI and all the research that's being done and that needs to be done, I'm wondering how you include, or can you include, farmers and food producers from the beginning of this research, so they don't feel like they're just recipients, but they feel like partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 13 different partner labs and centers of excellence and 25 different institutions, and we really rely on those partners to build and carry out community-based research projects. We also support almost 40 Good Food Fellows around the world, and each of them are carrying out place-based, community-based research in their communities, collaborating with farmers. We also are very open to folks who want to directly work with us, and so we do have some research studies that we also directly lead, and also just analyzing foods. And so if folks want to know, I have this, and I have this, and I've grown it in different ways, is it resulting in a signal in terms of nutrient diversity? We're really happy to have those conversations.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's really democratization at its best in science. One of the things that when we last spoke, you mentioned is the food intelligence economy. What is that?
The food intelligence economy is really going back to that concept where food is medicine, and we have that deep relationship to food that's healing. Right now, we don't even have that basic intelligence of food, and so it's really building that intelligence of food where it becomes common knowledge, even for my 6-year-old daughter, that she just has that intelligence. And the economy part is where the decision making now is centered around that food intelligence. And so the economy part is really bringing some economic value and decision making to that basic knowledge. And this is a world where we're seeing a lot less diet-related chronic disease, a world where farmers are given price premiums for their growing practices, that they have incentive to grow nourishing foods in nourishing ways.
Yeah, it's such a great concept. I also want you to talk a little bit about Food EDU on the PTF website and why, what resources are available to folks.
Absolutely. So we have a few exciting things happening at the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. We just announced a data visualization challenge to reimagine the future of the nutrition and food fact labels and labeling. And there's up to, I think, $40,000 or $50,000 of cash prizes. And so you can go to the American Heart Association's website, and we have a press release on that. So if you want to explore the data and think about how this can really change the way we as consumers and as food systems stewards understand food, and kind of reimagine that. So there's a prize for that. Also, we have our Food EDU platform, which is open access. Right now, we have a course that's called Food Omics and Society, and it provides the sort of groundwork on why is it important to understand food? How does this knowledge complement other ways of knowing, including traditional indigenous knowledge? And what are the societal applications for this type of knowledge towards building a food intelligence economy? And so we do have that open access, and encourage everybody to explore that. Right now, the data that we have available on our website is both discovery data as well as foundational data on what is in food. So we can look at the foods that the delicious and nourishing foods that we consumed at lunch today, and we can understand what are the diverse fiber components in the lentils that we consume that are actually feeding our gut microbiome. So you can explore your favorite foods and really start building your knowledge for food right today by exploring our open access database.
Awesome. Because we are on a college campus and we have a lot of young academics and scholars and wannabe Selenas probably in the room, what advice do you have to them to get involved in our food and agriculture systems in all kinds of different ways like you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the core is always, with all of this different knowledge, it's always really to follow your bliss, to follow your heart, and to always foster unconventional paths, as well as collaborations. And I think, Danny, you do such a remarkable, inspiring job of bringing diverse partners together and those diverse perspectives. I was a university professor also at Montana State University for 10 years in sustainable food systems, and I always encourage my graduate students to really create their own path, even if it doesn't exist. And so I had gotten my undergraduate degree in biology. I then had a master's degree in ethnobotany. I then had my PhD in biology, had my postdoc training in biomedical sciences, and then I put it all together as a professor of sustainable food systems because all those elements, the ecological, the cultural, the health, really contribute to looking at sustainability in a really holistic way. But along the way, I did hear from lots of people, what are you doing? This is quite an unconventional path. These dots don't connect. But in our systems approach, they connect really beautifully.
Absolutely. It was the best path for you to go on. I love it. I want to end with something, I think, we started out this event today talking about the uncertainty in the world and how dire, everything seems. But there is so much hope. You're finding hope. People in this room are finding hope. Do you have a call to action you want to leave people with?
Yeah, so I think the call to action, first of all, is to take action, and really let's rebuild our relationship with food. Let's each really commit to treating food like medicine, and let's do that collaboratively in partnership. I really like that you were saying how we have to listen to people that we typically didn't like to listen to. I think it's so important to have those unconventional partnerships, even with people who you think or institutions or sectors that you think are the problem. I think that's so, so important. And then as we move forward, it is so critical that we move forward with humanity in a world that is so increasingly being dominated by artificial intelligence, which I'm also collaborating on. We really have to find, I think, our path forward through being human.
Yeah, find the humanity. I always learn so much from you, Selena. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Round of applause. Thank you so much. Before our next conversation, we're going to play a video from Congressmember Greg Stanton, who represents Arizona's 4th District, right where we are. Please play the video.
Thank you to the Food Tank, Arizona State University Swette Center for Sustainable Food Systems, the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for organizing this official North American celebration of World Food Day. Let me share some stark realities. 1 in 10 Arizonans are living with diabetes, and an estimated 1 in 3 people have prediabetes. This disease costs our state almost $7 billion annually in direct medical costs and lost productivity combined. To put that in perspective, that sum would pay tuition for more than 500,000 Arizona residents to attend ASU each year. But beyond the dollars is the human cost, the suffering, the shortened lives, the families affected. We must do better. Here's what makes this especially urgent. Arizona is known as the winter salad bowl, producing much of the fruits and vegetables Americans eat during the winter months. Right here in Maricopa County, vegetable production ranks 2nd among Arizona counties and 17th among counties nationwide. We are a powerhouse in producing healthy food. This is the challenge before us today. How can we transform our food system so that the healthy food we grow so abundantly actually reaches our communities and reduces the incidence of diabetes and other chronic diseases right here in Arizona and across our nation? The food is medicine conversation is essential. I'm grateful this gathering is bringing together community leaders, Arizona farmers, nutrition experts, chefs, and advocates to develop real solutions. I wish I could be there myself, but due to the congressional calendar, I'm here in Washington, but I look forward to hearing about the innovative community-driven strategies you developed today. Thank you. Your work is vital and you are appreciated.
That's great. Now we get to talk about the role that food retail has in helping communities be healthier. I get to welcome Brandon Lombardi, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Sprouts Farmers Markets. Please give him a round of applause.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
I'm so glad you're here. You work with the Swette Center, right? Can you talk about that?
We do. Yeah, we do. We need to do a lot more. We do a little bit. So we support the school, the Center for Sustainable Food Systems. In fact, two people on my team right now I think are enrolled as students. One may have just finished, and one is taking their master's now. So we work with supporting the students in kind of their capstone projects, kind of hosting them for some of the work that they're doing in connection with the curriculum. But we need to do a lot more it's right in our backyard, and we're a local employer here. So we're based here in Arizona. A lot of people don't realize that. We have 450 stores around the country, but we started here in 2002 with 1 store, and it's been a wonderful ride.
It really is, it's great to see how much you've grown and how you're working with communities. And that's what I want to really talk about next. How can Sprouts support communities and their local food systems and, as a result, have healthier food available to folks?
Yeah, so I think retailers do have a role to play in this, especially if they're specialty retail like us. We focus on health. That's been in our DNA since we started as a fruit stand. Our founders started a fruit stand in 1943, and so focusing on fresh produce is in our DNA. It connects us back, and so what we try to do is focus in on supporting local farmers first and foremost, and then branching to organic. A lot of local farmers are not necessarily organic, but there's a different aspect to that, right? Focusing on supporting local economies and helping those local farmers bring their product to market. It's very difficult for local farmers to get distribution. It's a whole different ballgame unless you're at scale. So we try to focus on supporting local growers. Farming is expensive, takes a lot of investment. So the way we do that is working on multi-year commitments with local farmers and letting them know that they have a place to bring their harvest. And we do that by working with, I think we purchased $250 million worth of local produce last year, to give you some context as to kind of the scale of that. And we do that in all of our states. Obviously they change during growing seasons in terms of what we can bring to market. But that's one area that we focus on, and then another is organic. So 60% of our produce is organic. 30% of what we sell across the store is organic, and that's grown over the years. Both the demand and the supply has grown, but now the demand is outstripping supply. It used to be supply outstripped demand, but organic's been around a while. People tend to understand it more. you can argue about whether they understand the health benefits, et cetera, but they tend to associate it with, it's a little bit healthier for me and my family. So the demand for organic has greatly increased, but the supply hasn't caught up. There's not enough supply to fulfill the demand. And so we try to work with farmers to help them transition their land over time, because it takes a couple of years to do that, to get certified organic by the USDA. We help them put the pieces in place and have the tools they need to transition to organic, but it takes demand from the consumer to help get there, and so we try to bring that, you know, to the forefront as much as possible. So those are some of the things we do, and then it's really around curating a product assortment that is designed to be healthier and helping people understand what's important, what to look for in an ingredient set, in a nutrition profile. And you have to do it in a way that's delicious, because the taste profile is still number one in terms of healthy food. For those of you who are eating healthy in, you know, the early 2000s and 90s, et cetera, it was, you know, kashi, and it tasted like, they've evolved, but it tasted like, you know, cardboard. And so, you know, so we have to consistently be on the forefront of innovation and help small manufacturers and founders and entrepreneurs like Pierre, you know, bring their diverse product and healthier product to market. And so that's one of our key differentiators, what we focus on all day long, all the time. How do we get that new food, that new healthy grain, that new, you know, ancient grain, whatever it is, to market, so that we can both support that that entrepreneur and also bring that food to the consumer and help educate them about what that is. So a lot of things that we do as a retailer to try to bring this to life.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something you said before about the importance of a retailer like Sprouts providing multi-year contracts. And I don't think everyone, you know, especially the folks who will be listening to this later on understand why that's important, why long-term contracts for farmers are important.
Yeah, super important, and it's not that common. It's not terribly common, and we're just kind of in early stages of it as well. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, farming takes a lot of capital investment and a lot of time and energy and resources, and even, you know, a lot of farmers are retiring en masse. I mean, the next generation of farmers are not necessarily coming online as quickly as we need them to. So there's a lot of support that farmers need, even multi-generationally, to kind of make these farms work. And so the more consistency they can get in reliable economics, the better and more secure they'll feel in making that capital investment, investing their time and resources, bringing their family, you know, onto the farm to continue the legacy, because there will be viable financing there for them going forward. So we try to do that as much as possible so that they can have that reliance that somebody will be there for their harvest, rain, sleet, or snow, whether it turns out or doesn't turn out, someone's there, and they get a better price. They know that, you know, all of the food they grow is going to be purchased, whether it's fit for consumption or not, so they have reliability there, and then we get a better cost as a retailer, which can be passed on to the consumer. So it's a real triple win, and also there's less waste, because we can take that from the farm, and through our waste programs, we can either, if we can donate it first to people, or it can go to composting, or it can go to animal feed. So we try to complete the circle there. So for local farmers, I think, and small farmers, I think that's key. The multi-year commitments are key, especially if they're trying to transition from conventional to organic. That takes a lot of investment. They're not sure that there's something on the other side of that.
Yeah, that transition journey it's really important for a retailer to be along on that journey, right, and provide resources.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they have to know that someone's there on the other side partnering with them, especially small farmers.
Right.
I mean, that's key. If you've got 35 acres, you know, most retailers of scale can't play in that space. They need so much more than that. But if we're the way we're designed is we self-distribute produce, so we're really nimble, and so we can take 2 truckloads of strawberries that this small farmer has and can't offload to a much larger retailer, because that's just not how their distribution platform operates.
Yeah, being nimble is really key. You mentioned, preventing food waste, and I know that's something that's close to your heart. 10 or 15 years ago, retailers, whether they were, a bigger chain or a smaller chain like Sprouts, weren't really thinking about food rescue. What have you learned, as this has been something that's become important to the company?
So we started our food rescue program, we call it, in about 2014 in earnest. And it takes a lot to operationalize that sort of program. I mean, the intricacies of the logistics, partnering with food banks, in multiple communities, working with them on pickup times, operationalizing it at the store. You got hourly team members that are tasked with a lot of things all day long, every day.
Right.
And so how do you integrate into their program, and how do you make, as a business, the investment into the time that you're paying these people for their time? So how do you say, this is so important to us that we're going to pay people for their time to go and open that clamshell of blueberries, put it in this bin versus throwing it in the trash, because they need to really move on and stock the shelves for the consumer or rotate the produce, et cetera. So there are all these things that need to happen to make a program actually work like that. Once we got it in place, and continued to educate our teams on why this is important, get them bought in on the excitement of what we're doing for feeding people first, and then educating them on the stories that can come to life from that, like our compost program. Some of our compost goes to dairy farms, which produce milk that we then sell, and telling that story, getting people excited about it, that was a key unlock for us. And what we learned was, if done right, we can have a huge impact on food insecurity in our local communities, and we can touch people, where they live. And we took a slightly different approach because of our lean in on fresh. How much fresh we sell? 20% of our products sold is produce and meat, et cetera. We're able to figure out a distribution program and kind of a system where we donate 45% of what we donate is fresh food. So if you can compare that to, if you think about what you normally see at a food bank or food pantry, canned, packaged, and that's great, and every little bit is needed. But when you think about the health of fresh food, the importance of the nutrients you get from fresh food, the biodiversity that you get in your gut biome from fresh food versus packaged, there's no replacement for it. So what we learned is, if we can really concentrate on how to get that product to the consumer, to the end user, we're going to improve their health dramatically. So that's kind of how we've been focused on it.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about, there's this particular role for retailers, and farmers obviously have their role, but you both, as entities, can't do it alone. You really need consumers to be on this journey with you. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the ways that you're working to help consumers understand these issues, help educate them in different ways.
Yeah, so we try to really help our consumer understand the importance of eating healthy. There's a natural tailwind right now where people are more aware of the importance of health, more aware of how food plays a role in their health, and that's a good thing. Obviously, generations look at it differently. The aging baby boomer generation, they're more interested in it for longevity and really trying to improve that. They're getting to stages where they could be having health concerns as a natural part of aging. And then the younger generations are interested in it because they're more aware from social media, et cetera. You could talk about whether the MAHA thing has created some awareness, putting the vaccine stuff to one side. So there's some momentum in that space in terms of awareness and thoughtfulness around it. And so I think that's a wonderful thing. So but people still don't know how to do it. There's still confusion. Like, how do I eat healthy?
Right.
What's a good recipe? Where do I get it? It's expensive. There are still all of these barriers. And so we have to both educate people on the access, the affordability, and the how. And so we do that digitally. We engage our people digitally, with recipes, nutrition content, easy ways to do it through social channels. We just launched a loyalty program where one of the benefits you get, nutrition guidance, easy recipes, cart building, all of the things to help you based on, the needs that you may have, gluten-free, keto, whatever it might be, or just generally, I want to eat more produce. Like, how do I do this? Like, what's a good recipe for broccolini, whatever. So there are those sorts of things that we try to do. A lot of our customers, when you walk around, they're interested. They're reading the back of the package. And so that's a little bit different. So our customer naturally, I think, is a little bit more in tune to these things, where no matter where they are in their journey, they may be experts, they may be just starting, they may be trying to figure it out, and we try to be there for them in a consultative way, both with our people in store as well as the digital angle.
That's great. In these last final seconds, do you have advice for other retailers who are not as far along on the sort of, as Sprouts has been on helping people eat healthier?
Advice for other retailers?
Trade secret, Brandon. Trade secret.
I mean, you keep doing what you're doing, we'll do what we do.
Thank you. Give Brandon a round of applause, please. The next fireside chat we have is with Michelle Nishan, who is a chef and the executive chair of Wholesome Wave. He will be joined by Claire Magoya of the Arizona Republic. Before they join the stage, we have a video to share from Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, folks, it's Senator Mark Kelly, and I am honored to have the chance to speak at the North American World Food Day 2025 celebration at Arizona State University. It's amazing to bring together leaders across science, health, and agriculture to improve health and nutrition around the globe. The work all of you do, the efforts you lead, it makes a real difference here at home and for people around the world. Now, we can all agree that kids should not be starving to death anywhere on the planet. Now, I've been proud to work with Cindy McCain and the World Food Program, pushing to get life-saving food packages to families in need in places like Gaza and the Sudan. And back here in Arizona, too many families face challenges accessing basic things like healthy food and affordable health care. That's why I continue to fight cuts to vital programs like Meals on Wheels, SNAP, and Medicaid. Supporting food systems and health care isn't just policy. It's real people and real families. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great time at ASU today.
Hi.
Hello. Hey, everybody, I'm Michelle. Nice to see you.
Michelle, before I start pestering with you with questions on policy and budget cuts, I want us to go softer into a little bit of, the experiences you've had by growing up in a farm, by working so closely with farmers as a restaurant owner. And I want you to tell us a little bit about the link between sustainable agriculture, flavor, and nutrition.
So from as far back as I can remember, I used to get shipped down to my grandfather's farm in Morley, Missouri, from Chicago every summer for about 8 weeks with my older brother and many of our cousins to work my grandfather's farm. And I learned how to grow things, how to raise things, how to take the life of things, turn them into something delicious before I even got into high school. So to me, it was like just a normal way of living. And it's why I'm a chef today. If I didn't do that, I really don't know where I would be. Maybe jail, I don't know. I barely graduated high school, so I'm not an academic. But the interesting thing for me is it felt like something that I just assumed other kids were raised the way I was raised. I just assumed it because it was so simple and it was so natural and it was so easy. Everything made sense. Without fancy words, without labels, without concepts, it made sense. So what I've learned over the years of struggling through trying to, in the early days, in the late 70s and early 1980s, taking petty cash from the restaurant, paying farmers in advance half the crop value so that they had crop insurance, because I understood that as someone who worked on a struggling farm, and then had to go pick the stuff at the end of the season to get the stuff to my restaurant, because these were corn and soy growers growing tomatoes for me because I paid them in advance, right? That's it's different today. You can find heirloom tomatoes in a Piggly Wiggly now. So we've come a long way. We've come a long way. And all of my cousins, all of my aunts and uncles on my mother's side of the family who were still actively involved in farming lived very long lives, were very fit because they ate what they grew. They didn't know the word organic farming. They couldn't afford pesticides or those inputs, so we composted, we did all those. It was just normal stuff for them, but they were healthy. They were all healthy. I was stunned when I got into the professional food world and saw the food that was coming in the back door of these restaurants, and that's what led to my first form of advocacy, paying farmers in advance, and then getting me into all of the messes I've got into since then, because almost everything that we suffer these days that's some kind of an inequity or an inequality starts with lack of access, fair, equitable access to food, and for those who grow it, lack of fair, equitable access to equitable supply chains so that they have a market like what Pierre was talking about with this Fonio project.
Thank you. Yeah, it is all tied together, right? It's been 16 years since Wholesome Wave introduced, 16, right?
18.
18.
And we've been at it for a while.
Okay.
I feel like the farmer's commercial. You know, the guy who gets up there, Farmers Insurance, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. It's been 18 years, yeah.
18 years since Wholesome Wave introduced Double Up Food Box, you know, this incentive that doubles what you can get out of SNAP benefits for fresh veggies and fruit. And I guess then it's been 8 years since GOSNIP was made permanent. I want you to speak a little bit about where produce prescription programs are today nationwide, and where is, where does the political support for making it federal everywhere stand? And what is produce prescription? So for everyone here.
Yeah, so produce prescription, the concept of a produce prescription is in a clinical setting, a prescriber, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, somebody who's licensed to prescribe, can see a patient who is either struggling with, recently diagnosed, or at risk of contracting a diet-related disease. So it's usually 2 or more comorbidities for someone trending. But if somebody is a qualifying patient, they then can be given prescriptions from the nutritionist who coaches them on how to use the prescription so that they can then get the servings of fruits and vegetables they need to better manage the diet-related disease or to prevent the diet-related disease in the first place. We fielded the first clinical produce prescription programs in 2009, and now they're in over 35 states in various forms of iteration. In 22 of the states, they're clinical based, where there's a clinical partner. There are groups in some states that are doing produce prescriptions simply as a voucher system to give people extra money to spend on fruits and vegetables, but it doesn't include the diagnosis, the prescription, and then tracking the biometrics and other factors that can build an evidence base that can lead to that federal policy. But we're getting closer than ever. Recently, we convened a National Produce Prescription Collaborative back in 2019, and right now that we're on the second set of Medicaid money through Indian Health Services in tribal communities to provide produce prescription for indigenous communities. And going into the second year for the Veterans Administration, these are important pilots because they are Medicaid funding going to food benefits that can then be applied to the biometric outcomes of that activity. It's a longer road to hoe. For nutrition incentives, when we started them in 2007, they were not legal. You could not market something to a SNAP consumer that wasn't available to everybody. We couldn't afford that. So we worked with the George W. Bush administration to make it legal, became a federally funded pilot in 2014 during the Obama administration, became permanent and named after Gus in 2018 during the first Trump administration, and it's actually included in the MAHA platform right now. So that's a timeline from 2007 to now. That's what it took for nutrition incentives. We've proven that it's nonpartisan because a lot of the evidence that we use, combination of storytelling, which is very, very important, as Kathleen and Crystal were talking about earlier, but also farmers putting more land in production, grocery retailers selling more produce, which is their highest margin, but their biggest risk. People performing better at school, people performing better at work because they were eating better food. It was a multi-stakeholder argument that has been able to move through all those administrations. I think there's great hope now for produce prescriptions because with this administration talking so much about food as medicine, there's an actual cohort of Americans who used to not want to talk about it, frankly, because they felt that they were going to be painted as a progressive if they talked about it, and now they're talking about it. So there's a much broader public awareness now, and I think more constituent support for these concepts.
When you say there's more hope for it, you mean like in terms of gaining federal dollars so that it's all covered by Medicaid?
Who knows? I mean, that's our intention. You know, that is our intention. It's just such a squirrely environment right now because there are no guardrails of any kind. It's tough to indicate, but in the past administration, I don't know how many people were at the Food as Medicine convening at HHS, and I was very disappointed in that meeting. The deputy secretary asked each of the 6 heads of the different departments of HHS what excited them about food as medicine, and everybody except for the FDA basically said, we look forward to building the evidence base. And that is just such a cop-out to me, because there are Oxford studies, NHANES studies, JAMA studies, Framingham-style size studies happening over decades that demonstrate that simply increasing your consumption of fruits and vegetables reduces your risk of contracting, suffering, or dying from 5 diet-related diseases. We don't need more evidence, we need action.
We're not done yet.
No, I'm good.
Sorry, too close.
Sorry.
So, you know, with $1 billion gone, terminating LFPA, help me out, local food purchase agreements.
Yes.
You know, local food that was going to food banks, and then like the termination also of the past version of local food for schools. How do you leverage, you know, like you and your team at Wholesome Wave, how do you leverage the opportunity that we're having with the MAHA discourse, with this kind of contradictory actions? Like, how do you give it to them straight?
It's a whack-a-mole environment, and the one thing that never changes in any environment is that we all have to eat, or we perish. All of us. Doesn't matter what our ideology is. Doesn't matter from where we came or to whom we pray, what color our skin, whatever. We have to do this, and there's economic opportunity in every decision that somebody makes when it comes to food. And there's economic consequence in making those same decisions. And again, Crystal and others have spoken pretty eloquently and clearly about the financial cost of diet-related disease. There's only one thing that causes diet-related disease, and that's food, right? So we look at LFPA and LFS, local food sourcing, local food procurement. It was an easy, I think it was a mistaken target I think when Musk and his team came in, they used AI to scrub all the government grant programs. And they had their 113 keywords that were focused on DEI type stuff. And both of those programs were pretty heavy with that language, and that just made them an easy target. I think for this administration, there's a brief opportunity, and our intention is this. One of the things that we're doing at Wholesome Wave, the way we succeeded with the nutrition incentives going from illegal to permanent through 4 administrations ruled by both sides of the aisle, we achieved that by working in communities, having members of Congress and agency heads see nutrition incentives working in their communities, students doing better at school, people calling in sick less at work, farmers making more money, retailers making more money, buying transplanters, et cetera. Kids from Title I grade schools, Rayleigh's Market in Sacramento hires specifically kids from Title I grade schools to give them opportunity, and kids who had access to nutrition incentives and produce prescriptions were doing better at work. So these were all arguments that happened in the places that they called home. We're now convening the national culinary community. You guys have talked about us a couple of times, how we can create healthy recipes when we're looking at the periodic table for food and all that good. We're more than a pretty face that can cook delicious stuff and give you a recipe. I convened the James Beard Boot Camps for Policy and Change. I co-founded them with Eric Kessler about 13 years ago, where we get chefs together to help them understand the power of their actual voice, that they are a taxpayer, a business owner, a business leader, an employer, an influencer in the community that they call home, not just a recipe provider. And that when people, every year there's a Edelman Trust Barometer, and when it comes to issues around food, chefs are always in the top 75% of who's most trusted when it comes to these issues. And it's because when we open our door, we welcome everybody first. Everyone's welcome. We don't have signs saying MAGA not welcome, AOC not welcome, independents not welcome. Everybody's welcome. We just want to make them all happy. And then when they have a problem with food or a question about food, is organic real? Michelle, my daughter married a vegan, what do I do? You know, they come to us because they know we'll tell them the truth, and we'll tell them in using language they can understand. And the culinary community now is connecting in 7 states with the farming community, all conservative farmers, to go to the administration and say, hey, you guys kind of goofed.
Can you mention the state?
Huh?
Can you mention the states?
I can. Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Colorado, California, and Washington. And we were just in the pilot when all this crap hit the fan, but we can't not do something. And we're just going to basically say with the argument, you want to make America healthy again, you want to make America great again. What better way to do that than to provide my hard-earned taxpayer dollars to go to a farmer so that grade school kids can have Texas-grown, Arkansas-grown, Louisiana-grown food on their plates so that our low-income neighbors who fell on hard times can continue to feed their kids, their families, healthy food, support local farmers, self-reliance, self-resilience. All of these things are in that type of approach. Call it whatever you want, but one of the mistakes I think the movement has been making is they've been going to this administration and say, bring back LFPA. That would be like going to Cory Booker if he won the next election, saying, bring back the Trump tax cuts. The answer is going to be no. It's going to be no. Don't ask somebody to bring back something that they just eliminated from who they now have been calling the enemy. Let it be their idea, and that's the approach that we're taking.
On that note, the administration did bring back, in some form, local food for schools. Do you see it happening in a different, like that they bring back in a different shape LFPA?
I think what would happen here, because LFPA was really being driven through public institutions, health departments, et cetera, right? this would, the state's departments of agriculture are perfectly capable of handling these types of grant programs if the staff's not cut. Just, you know, the whack-a-mole nature of what we're talking about is a little bit uncertain, no doubt about it. But when you look at the fact that a good percentage of food growers in this country that were actually benefiting from LFPA are conservative farmers, and they're a significant constituent of the Republican Party, it's in the interest of that party to restore this. And it's it's not difficult to scenario plan in an environment where there are squishy guardrails to say, here's a sector of federal workers that aren't going to get cut because we need to get this money back to farmers. Rather than big giant relief piles for like a couple of commodities, something that actually really supports that local living economy, that provides the self-reliance that Make America Great Again is supposed to be all about. So we're just going to use that language. We're telling the truth in the way that they tend to think about things, and it is true. That would, imagine if every grade school kid could have local produce on their plate for lunch tomorrow, that would be making America great again. I'm telling the truth.
We still need to talk about addressing inequities in the farming systems, right? And in the farming system, in the access of farmers of all demographics to the same resources. So I want to ask you, like, what are some of the policies, what tools do we have to make sure that it's food is medicine and it's not like, but not for everyone, right? That these benefits really go the furthest?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's like two questions in a way, if I'm hearing it correctly. One is lack of equity in farming for agricultural producers, and then the other is how does that connect with making sure that the maximum benefit gets to those who need it, that are a patient or someone who's trying to not become a patient. Was that, or, yeah, am I understanding the question or no?
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I made it a little bit tangled up, but yeah, it's meant for both, like how it can make, how can it reach the most farmers in an equitable way?
Right.
And also, of course, the recipients of Food is Medicine programs with these big cuts to our healthcare system, with the cuts to SNAP, how can we like infiltrate tools and guardrails that ensure that it is for everyone, that it does make America great again?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the tools for inequity in farming, I thought, I didn't think it was the best approach for the USDA to put equity language in agricultural programs that were meant to provide public dollars to buy in-state grown food and put it into public grade schools. If you want better equity in farming, there are USDA lending boards in almost every county in the country, and almost everybody on those boards is white. Now, if I go to get a loan, and I've been in business for 2 or 3 generations, and I don't bring collateral, and I've paid back loans in the past, and I go to get a loan, I have a pretty good chance of getting a loan as a farmer. If you go with the same record, you have less of a chance. If Pierre goes, he doesn't have a chance. If Sean Sherman goes, he doesn't have a chance. There's a lot of bias in these boards, and to me, if you're going to be an administration that's going to be about being more equitable when it comes to our food system, you have to look at that level of what's preventing people from getting the capital that they need to put more land in production, buy a transplanter, actually get some income, because it's so funny. Any good farmer will tell you, we put the seeds in the ground, we put the plants in the ground, and then we pray. Because they paid for the seeds, they paid for the plants, they paid for the transplanter, the gas to run the tractor, fixing the tractor, they're watering, they're managing pests, they're managing weeds, they're doing all that stuff, and they don't get their money until November or December. And they're out of pocket starting in February, right? So those are the places where we actually need to address inequity, I believe. I think any grant system or any public dollar should go to any farmer. And when you look at one thing that states' departments of agriculture have been pretty good at is making sure that every farmer has an opportunity in it. It's at that lending and at that the capital that a farmer just needs a simple cash flow loan. It really depends on who you are that determines whether you get that loan or not. So I think that needs to get fixed. Inherently with fruits and vegetables, they're naturally more biodiverse in the first place. Specialty crop growers are the ones who are kind of left out of any benefit from the federal subsidy system. It wasn't until 2014 Farm Bill that you could actually get federally subsidized crop insurance as a fruit and vegetable grower. The thing we're supposed to be eating 5 times a day gets no insurance, right? But cotton for jeans, try to eat your jeans, but the cotton guy, gets hit by a tornado, he gets the full crop value of his crop at the end of the year. That's not fair. But these programs, just getting them funded, which is why I thought $1 billion was a really good number, would really have an incredible impact on the specialty crop economy, the more biodiverse, in so many states, growers that are, it's one of the few things that grows like in every state is fruits and vegetables, except like maybe Alaska. They still grow there, but it's a short season. But that was a powerful economic opportunity. So I think targeting the right sectors with the right stuff, lending boards, big issue. That needs to get fixed. Continuing to support specialty crop growers with public dollars, that's easy. The impact to the end consumer, when a low-income family on Medicaid can go and get the food that they need to keep their family healthy, that's not going to happen if we don't have a robust specialty crop agriculture system. So that's how I see it, if that makes sense. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I love the way the direction you went with that. Okay. Closing thoughts. Michelle.
Oh, jeez. I do it every time.
No, I did.
Well, my mom said if she was still alive, she'd tell you. If you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how a clock is built. So I apologize for
that. Tell us, we're now going to go soon into breakout rooms and meet other people. What is your suggestion, the lessons of how not to work in silos, how to partner better to make better change?
Well, the one thing I learned with advocacy, and again, our success with nutrition incentives was, I'm a chef, I brought my argument to it. You support specialty crop growers, it strengthens my supply chain so my customers can have more, and people who can't afford to eat in my restaurant can put the same heirloom tomato in front of their kids for dinner tonight. That's my argument. But, Rayleigh's argument was my Title I, high school students working part-time are doing a better job because they're being fed better. And an insurer in Tulsa, Oklahoma, told Frank Lucas that their mailroom workers, their lower wage workers, weren't calling in sick as much because they had access to double up food bucks. There are people in different sectors of our economy, of business, in our communities who benefit from these things. And if there's one thing that I've learned, and the late Gus Schumacher taught me this, I'm going to try not to get emotional because I really miss him, is that decision makers, lawmakers, make decisions based on what's relevant to them. And if you don't understand that when you're crafting your argument, your chance of your argument sticking goes down by about 95%. So with Frank Lucas, it was, we're going to be all about small business. And we proved that 3,600 farmers put more land in production. They bought transplanters. They built hoop houses. They hired more people. They bought more gas. They diversified their crop plantings to meet a new diverse market. It was a classic small business incubation program. It wasn't a food insecurity program. So just understand who your decision makers are, why they make their decision, and think of everybody else in the community that's going to benefit from that domino effect from food, because it affects human health, environmental health, economic health, cultural health, community health. It's the one single subject that affects all that stuff. So there's someone in each of those sectors that's going to be an ally of yours. Let them bring their argument from their perspective, and then the lawmaker understands this is something everybody wants. And good luck with that.
Thank you both so much. That was great. Thank you. We have one more conversation coming up, but please make sure that you stay with us. We have a lot more to do. After our main stage programming, we're going to split up into those breakout rooms that Clara mentioned, where you'll have the chance to speak with one another and make your voices heard. This is a really, really important part of today's discussions, because your contributions will be used to shape a white paper that will come out of today's summits. Following the breakouts, we'll head into a reception with really delicious foods and drink, including a dish developed by Michelle, who you just heard from. It's a Three Sisters soup, so please look out for it. We'll also have bites from Alyssa Dixon, an Indigenous chef who is behind Alyssa's Kosin, who has prepared a roasted nopales salsa paired with blue corn chips, as well as a brown peppery bean burger wrapped in butter lettuce. So there will also be a really special performance from hoop dancers. So a lot to come, as well as a band called Notes from Neptune. All right, before our final conversation, we're going to hear from the mayor of Tempe, Corey Woods.
Happy World Food Day, everyone. I'm Mayor Corey Woods, and while I regrettably cannot be there in person with you all today, I'm grateful for the opportunity to welcome you all to the official North American World Food Day 2025 celebration. At the City of Tempe, we are committed to increasing access to healthy food by connecting with our local food producers and growers. Our Sustainability and Resilience Division is devoted to building a resilient food system in Tempe, and we are excited to share some of the new developments our city is launching to advance this critical mission. We're very excited about the launch of the Create Kitchen Incubator Program, a free educational program we've developed with Local First Arizona for community members on how to create sustainable and thriving food businesses. In addition, our team is also supporting local food businesses by helping shift purchasing to our local food growers, which reduces food miles and boosts the Arizona economy. By prioritizing local production, we not only strengthen our economy, but we also help protect the environment. So in the spirit of building a community around food, we're planting a food forest at the Tempe Envision Center, where the community can also join classes on harvesting and preparing food from their own gardens, as well as learn about seasonal and native plants in Arizona. We also plan to increase local access to sustainably grown produce with a series of pop-up farmers markets across the entire city. Tempe is dedicated to the mission of increasing nutrition, sustainability, and equity in food across our city. As we stand together, we are shaping a future where food is not only a source of nourishment, but a force for healing our bodies, our communities, and our planet. Together, let's turn today's conversations into tomorrow's change. Thank you, and enjoy your time in Tempe.
Great. That was great. Now I'd like to invite Kathleen, Lindsay, and Tom back to the stage. Give them a round of applause. What a great day. It's not over yet. We have these breakout sessions that are coming, a lot of work to be done there. But I want to know from each of you what stood out the most. What are you taking home? What is your sort of call to action? Kathleen, you can go first.
Sure.
I'm looking right at you.
So I'm stealing this from the produce industry, but hearing from Michelle, Arna, others, I like their slogan, which is, before there were pharmacies, there were farms.
Right, right.
And to me, a real take-home message, at least for the Swette Center, because we work on food systems and a lot about how we produce food. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram and
all the things.
LinkedIn, all the things. But anyhow, really, I'm not going to duplicate what my colleagues are doing in dietetics or in medicine or whatever, but it made it very clear to me that my research center in this school needs to be in this space.
Yeah, for real, for real. That's a great one. Give that a round of applause. That's pretty cool. Lindsay, my friend, what stood out for you today?
You know, I think what stood out to me was actually something that Kathleen said, which was, you know, going back to that idea of collaboration and having conversations together, being out there in the reception later on this afternoon and being around the table, because the only way that we're going to be able to make real change that's going to benefit this generation right now and the future is if we're willing to work hand in hand in these issues. And so I learned a lot today, things that are new to me that I need to take home. And the last piece I would say with that is, as you start to learn these conversations and get curious, have these conversations with other people in your lives, in particular children. You know, little people are going to soon be the ones making decisions and shaping the future. And so having them see themselves in the conversation, having a seat at the table, having their voice heard, developing their own opinions about these issues, I think will carry a lot of weight as well.
Thanks, Lindsay. Give her a round of applause, please. Tom, Selena's daughter said that World Food Day should be every day. And so as we end this World Food Day, and at the 80th anniversary of FAO, what do you want people to take away?
I mean, I think before I answer that, I think one observation I have from today is that I think we're asking our farmers for entirely too much. I think for the longest time we've been asking them for abundant food and cheap food. Now we're asking them for abundant, cheap, nutritious food. And we're doing that at a time when their input costs, their costs of production are skyrocketing. And I know on the consumer end, food prices are skyrocketing. But those increased prices are not necessarily benefiting most farmers. Farmers often aren't seeing increased profit as a result, so that math just doesn't add up. And so one takeaway is that there are some fundamental changes we need to make in terms of supply and demand, incentives across our agri-food systems. But dovetailing with what Kathleen and Lindsay just said, I think what gives me hope is seeing even just here, locally, how many actors and organizations and people are committed and are really driving things. I think instead of looking to the global level, the national level, the federal level, I think it's really going to be local actors like all of you here in this room that are ultimately going to affect the change that we need.
Excellent. What a great way to end. Give him a round of applause and give these great partners a round of applause. Thank you all. This was great. Thank you so much. All right, so what an incredible way to celebrate World Food Day. Thanks to the amazing speakers and moderators. Give them a quick round of applause. Of course, our hosts, the Swette Center, along with FAO and the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. Quick round of applause. I want to thank in advance today's facilitators for the breakouts and the rapporteurs. They have a big job ahead of them, and it's going to be fun, so give them a round of applause. Video West in the back, who kept the production flawless. Give them a round of applause. My food tank colleagues, Bernard Pollock, Elena Seeley, and Kenzie Wade, they need a big round of applause. They make this happen. And thanks to all of you who joined us today. I know it's often hard to break up your workday and be part of these discussions, so thank you for being here. Give yourselves a round of applause.